When you first came to university, what kind of technology were you working with then? Like, what was the state of technology on campus, and how has it changed? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way in these 40 years. So I came to campus, and we were using decks of cards with Fortran programming, and COBOL programming and other languages, and you bring your decks to the UNIVAC machine. It was a big place here. The computer center was famous. It was a big installation, and so you bring your decks of cards, and eventually we moved over towards more online and terminals, and we were early developers and users of the Plato system, which was an educational system from the University of Illinois, but it had widespread influence, and things like, all kinds of notes and text messaging and all those things came from Plato. You can see the direct connection. And things like wikis and Wikipedia and participation and collaboration were all starting to emerge at those times. So the early days were characterized by usage for scientific computing, and that was my background. I was doing physics computing, and even as an undergraduate at Brookhaven National Laboratories. So working on those kind of problems and database systems was a natural place for me, but I was looking ahead toward the idea of broader use, not just for researchers, but so-called discretionary users, where you weren't doing this because you had to, you were doing it because you wanted to. And the early developments of email, imagine, there was a time before email, but email was a great step forward. And I was an ambitious and early email user, and I could see the way that it would allow me to connect with more people, and that was a big advantage. So we and others began to do work and studies about email and about word processing systems, and a lot of the work that we did contributed to making those easier for people to use. And I have to restate, this idea of universal usability was really strong around here and continues to be. Maryland is now a world leader with the Trace Center that Professor Greg Vanderheiden leads over here. It's in the iSchool, and that group is around the world known for doing leadership work. The stuff that's on the software on your Apple, Mac, or your PC that facilitates accessibility comes from Greg Vanderheiden's work. So that's another sort of important step of what we're doing here. A further contribution of Maryland was the kids team and the work on kids in computing. Allison Druin, Ben Peterson, and others began that work. I was happy. One of my contributions to Maryland was to get them hired here in 1997. And they developed these notions about how to design with kids, not for them, but with them. Children as our technology design partners. So we're known for that. I just came from the HCIL, where the visiting researchers had come for 2 weeks to study how Maryland does its work about kids and computing. So all of those things reflect this concern for the people-oriented side. And I should say it was a challenge in my early days to make that acceptable here at Maryland. Azrael Rosenfeld was a supporter, and he did promote the development of the Human-Computer Interaction Lab. But it took me years till I got students who were ready to do PhD in this area. So I have an unusual profile in that it took me a long time till I got my first PhD student, and then they kept going because that had emerged finally as an acceptable area of computing. So another one of my satisfactions is to see that this 35-year history has led to widespread acceptance, and I'm enjoying these days picking up honorary doctorates. I just was in Swansea University in Wales, and in 3 weeks I go to University of Pretoria in South Africa, so that'll be my 6th honorary doctorate. So it's kind of nice that after all those struggles, this topic and the work that was done here at Maryland are getting worldwide recognition.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That really makes me think. It brings me to what I've been reading in Leonardo's laptop, which I think, as you mentioned, was really a visionary work, and you were looking forward to the future, and as you said, the old computing versus new computing in the book. And in many ways, I think you've had that visionary that vision from very early on, and I was wondering, what do you think there was? Why did you have that vision? What? I mean, especially in the face of that, people were not accepting or very interested in this. Yeah. So, what was it that? Was there something that happened that you were like, this should be available to everybody, or?
I would say I had the good fortune of an interesting childhood as the son of two journalists in rich literary circles of New York. My sister was an English professor. My uncle was the legendary photographer David Seymour. So I was surrounded by humanities types, people who thought about the human issues and human concerns. My rebellion, of course, was to go into computing, but I always had a larger vision. And growing up in New York was a wonderful experience of going to the New York Philharmonic and listening to Leonard Bernstein, and going to the Museum of Modern Art and seeing and hearing the great cultural opportunities that New York City brought to me. So that was always a very important part of myself. Now, I was challenged because I had many diverse interests, from poetry and psychology and physics and programming and all these things. So I was sort of struggling in college to see what direction to take. And at the time, Marshall McLuhan's writings were very influential to me. His book, The Medium is the Message and Understanding Media, talked about the new world, the global electronic village, as he characterized it. And I went to see him and talk with him about this issue. And he had said that in the new age of electronic interconnection, specialization will die and general interconnections will become more prevalent. He had many other theories, some of which came true. And I would say, so that's always been the vision in my mind, that the boundaries between disciplines would be lowered, and that, people would have a broader view. I would say that happens sometimes, but I would say after all these years, we're still in an environment where we have strong disciplinary boundaries. And within departments like computer science, there's a strong focus on computing. Other places, and the Human-Computer Interaction Lab is a place which cultivates interdisciplinary connections with psychology and sociology and economics and business, and the Maryland Institute for Technology and the Humanities, myth, journalism. All those connections were really important to me. And I was the one who, on this campus, one of the pleasures of being at a big state university is that all these great talks going on all around campus. And so I got to hear Noam Chomsky and Umberto Eco and the Dalai Lama and Bill Gates. I mean, these were some of the people who came through to this campus. And that was another positive aspect of my being here at Maryland. So that was great.
That's really awesome. That's interesting. So it was really growing up, being surrounded by these artistic folks that, gave you this appreciation.
I think so.
Continued appreciation.
I think so. And in fact, I continue to do these things. In March, I ran a symposium, a colloquium for the National Academy of Sciences on creativity and collaboration, and about creativity across the disciplines. And the message there was to go back to the Leonardo da Vinci days and the integration of arts and science, of design and engineering. And so I've become an advocate of having our students in computer science study art, or design at least, and learning about design thinking opens them to other possibilities. So I remain engaged in those kind of efforts. That conference was very satisfying moment for me. And it was the kind of thing that allowed me to invite 24 speakers to come together, and those, produce an exciting few days.